Thank you, James. Well done. And Patrick, well done. First Sunday at Old Stone Church. Although Patrick tells me it's usually the second Sunday you got to worry about. First Sunday you get forgiveness if you mess up. Actually, this is church. You get forgiveness every Sunday. Not for messing up on the organ. You don't get forgiveness for that. But no, I'm kidding. You're doing a great job, Patrick. We're very glad that you're here. How many remember that old movie, Stripes, with Bill Murray and John Candy? You know, that movie provides for me one of my favorite quotes. I don't know if you remember the scene. Bill Murray's trying to pull his platoon together. They're just a ragtag bunch, and they can't seem to get their drills right. So he's trying to find that one thing they all hold in common that will unite them, pull them all together. And he says, you know, we all have one thing in common. Our ancestors were all kicked out of some of the nicest countries in the world. That may be partially true, but I'm thinking the thing that really binds us together in this nation is our belief that the underpinning value of our nation is freedom. At risk of offering you an understatement here, we hold freedom very dearly to us here in America. Our Constitution ensures our freedom. Our laws protect our freedom. Throughout our history, thousands upon thousands of America's children, our soldiers, have died defending our freedom. Well, tomorrow is July 4th. Tomorrow we will rightfully celebrate our liberty from Mother England. And we will celebrate our freedom, among other things, to self-govern, to peaceably assemble, to establish our religion free from the tyranny of monarchies and other oppressive governments. We'll celebrate our freedom to speak freely in the press and even challenge our government when it fails to represent us, the very people who created it. I'm here today to say, let us not take our freedom lightly in America. Our freedoms are precious, and indeed they are worth dying for in order to defend. But look, it seems to me that lately we've begun to think of freedom as a sort of commodity, something to be acquired or purchased, like the freedom of a new boat that gets us out on the open waters. Any boat owners here? You know a new boat is not your way to freedom, is it? In fact, I have a friend down in Savannah, Georgia, who has a boat. He says, Mark, you know what boat stands for? Bring on another 1,000. Constant work. He says, the two happiest days in a boater's life are the day he gets his boat and the day he sells his boat. Now, we know that those material things that we purchase really are not the way to freedom. Sometimes we think of freedom like an early retirement, which frees us up to do all those things we wished we'd done with our life earlier, but we just didn't have the time or the freedom. But freedom is hardly a commodity at all. Freedom is our way of life. Freedom is the way. Freedom is the path we take. It's the road we travel. Freedom is the choices we make about who we will serve and who we will not serve. Freedom is about the choice about who we allow to have a claim on our lives and who we do not allow to have a claim on our lives. Freedom is about the choice about who we serve and who we do not serve. Though a prolific American songwriter, Bob Dylan, once said, "It may be the devil and it may be the Lord, but you still have to serve somebody." As a person of faith, I believe we are most free when the one we serve is God. Not when we're serving our purchases, not when we're serving the imaginations of our heart, but when we serve God, when we live our lives under the dispensation of God's amazing grace. Jesus himself said, you can't have two masters. You can't have two masters. You're going to love one and hate the other. You're going to be torn in two different directions, torn asunder in your own thinking, in your own heart, in your own spirit. You got to serve somebody. Jesus says you got to serve God. For the first 12 years of my life, I grew up in the house of a prison chaplain. My father's ministry, at least the first 12 years of my life, was carried out in prison. He was a chaplain at a detention center and also at some of the largest penitentiaries in Canada. And so around the dinner table, my father would often share with me the stories of his experiences in the day. Really, I think Dad was trying to teach me and teach my brothers lessons for life about how to be free in this world. One story in particular that I recall often, it still lives with me, is the story of a man who was banging his head against the bars in his prison cell. He was so upset, he was trying to take his own life. And in those days, you didn't send in a psychiatrist or a psychologist. You sent in the humble prison chaplain. My father went in nervously, going to deal with this man who was physically violent. And he sat down on the cot next to the man and got the man to calm down. And my father asked him to detail for him why he was so upset other than just being in prison. And the man said, I feel like I'm trapped here. I'm enslaved. At 6 o'clock in the morning, a bell rings and it tells me to get out of bed. 10 minutes later, another bell rings and it says that I have to be dressed and standing at the door to my cell. 5 minutes later, the bell rings, another bell rings, and I have to go down and use the washroom. And then another bell rings. It tells me when it's time to go back to the cell. Another bell rings, tells me it's time to go to breakfast. He said, I'm enslaved to these bells. My father prayed with the man and then said to him, listen, why don't you train your body, train your mind to wake up 10 minutes before 6, 10 minutes before the bell rings. And instead of waiting for a bell to tell you when to stand at the doorway to your cell and be dressed, why don't you be dressed ahead of time? Beat the bell so that the bell is no longer your master, but God can once again be your master. It's about who you serve first and foremost in your life. It impressed me that this man was able to find freedom in the most unlikely of places. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I told you that story is still with me after many, many years. It's with me because those times in my own life when I feel trapped or I feel burdened by place, by context, by situation, I remember if that guy can find freedom in Christ in prison, then I ought to be able to find freedom anywhere that I am. I'll tell you what, you can find that freedom too. It's about who we serve. It may be the devil and it may be the Lord. Let me tell you, when it's the Lord, that's where we come to know perfect freedom. Well, I don't know about you, but these days, I have to admit, these days I worry that freedom in America is in jeopardy. I believe that freedom is in jeopardy in America because we're serving the wrong masters. We certainly don't have God at the center very much these days. We certainly aren't serving God first. We serve a lot of other things first. I think we're serving a lot of lesser gods because we as individuals and because we as a nation are serving debts these days. We live in a great country, the United States of America, which is increasingly owned by absentee landlords in China and other nations abroad who hold the note on America and who do not always share our faith. They don't share our values. They certainly don't share our sense of urgency when it comes to defending our freedom. Listen, how can we maintain liberty here in America when we spend more money than we generate, when we import more than we export, when we borrow more foreign dollars than we can possibly repay, not in this generation, the next, or 3 down the road? How can we protect our liberty here in America when foreign governments have such a high stake in our economy and an ability to control our national outcomes? I don't know about you, but I worry that we will end up surrendering our freedom as collateral on debts owed to foreign masters. And you have to admit, as much as the weight of uncontrollable debt presses down on us as individuals and as families, our national debt and our continued reliance on government spending crushes us as a people. It crushes us as a people. We lose our sense of freedom under that weight. I don't know if I'm making you uncomfortable today. I don't know if you're worried that this may be a little too political for Independence Day. But let me tell you, in England, at the time of the American Revolution, they didn't call it the American Revolution. They called it the Presbyterian Revolt. Some say we're still a little revolting today. It's time, I think, that we as people of faith reoriented our nation back to that place where freedom is something to be valued, something to be cared for, something to be defended and protected. I have a challenge for us this day. A challenge for us as a nation, a challenge for our leaders, and a challenge for us, people of faith. This Independence Day, as we fast approach this debt ceiling that we're all anxious about, and as our national leaders gather in Washington this weekend, surrendering their Independence Day weekend holiday in order to resolve this issue, first and foremost, I'd like for us to challenge our leaders to come together across the aisle and resolve this national debt crisis. And I'd like to challenge people of faith throughout this nation, people everywhere, starting with us here in the Old Stone Church, in the heart of this city, in the heart of this region, to start a prayer fast for our nation. When you wake up in the morning and you offer your prayers of thanks and your prayers of petition to God, I would like you to include in your prayers a prayer for our leaders. Not a prayer to get this one out of office and that one in, or a prayer to have that. Nah, I'm talking about a prayer that our leaders might lead. A prayer that we might be able to really come together and resolve this, that we might protect liberty in America. And when your head hits the pillow at night, before it does, I'd like you to say a prayer that we people of faith might have our spiritual compasses recalibrated, that we remember where perfect freedom really lies. It lies in serving God. It lies in having God at the center, not our material wants and desires and distractions. Look, it's not just the soldier that we count on to make sacrifices in the name of freedom. It's the politicians we elect to protect our liberty. We want them to make sacrifices as well. It's the people of faith that they represent. I ask them, I ask you, I ask all of us, right, left, and in between, to sacrifice political ideologies and stubborn partisanships to defend our clearest and most shared value, our freedom here in America.